Hello everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope that your day is going great. We are thrilled that you decided to spend this Thursday evening in good company with Education USA, learning more about admission requirements in the United States. Before we get started, let me just briefly introduce myself and talk about today's topic. So, as some of you may already know, my name is Victoria and I'm the outreach coordinator for the Education USA network here in Ukraine. We're, of course, part of the global network of the US Department of State, which consists of over 435 advising centers in more than 180 countries. We are part of this network that is committed to promoting diversity in US higher education system and, of course, building bridges of knowledge across borders. We understand that the process of applying to US universities is quite different from that in Ukraine, so we are here to help you any steps of the process and answer all the questions you may have from beginning to end. So today we're going to dive deeper into admission policies in the United States. So how do you make your application stand out among the pile of applications that US colleges and universities receive every year? Well, there's no better way to find out than directly from an admission officer and, of course, from a successful student in the US. So it is my pleasure to welcome Ketrін Bun, Senior International Admissions Counselor at Temple University, who is going to share some valuable insights into the admission process and how to really make sure that you stand out and talk about your accomplishments effectively so that you make your application truly unforgettable. Ketrін, it's such a pleasure to have you here with us. Please take it away. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much for having me here today. My name is Katie. As she's mentioned, I am an international admissions counselor here at Temple. And good morning from Philadelphia, and good afternoon and evening to those of you Zooming in from other parts of the globe. How do I share my screen? There we go. Perfect. So today I'm going to give you more insight and knowledge about applying to U.S. colleges by looking very closely at different parts of the application and highlighting what counselors are really looking for when they're looking at your application. So we're going to have some time after the presentation to ask questions, but this will also be a little bit interactive, so I will have some questions I will be asking you as we go along. So this is just a little bit of an overview. We're going to first cover the application, then we're going to go over the transcripts, test scores, letter of recommendations, and then throughout the presentation, I will give you a few general tips and things to consider so you will feel more confident and ready to apply when you go to submit your own application. I thought I would start the presentation off by asking a question. Does anybody know what the 3 requirements are of a college application? You can put them in the chat. Do you have any guesses? Well, that's okay if you don't have any guesses. That's why we're here. So the 3 requirements, in addition to the application, colleges will require your transcripts. They might require standardized test scores and letters of recommendations. So let's first talk about the application. Ideally, when do you think you should start filling out college applications? Either when you graduate from high school or the summer between your junior and senior year of high school. You can put your guesses in the chat. All right, so, well, the answer is number 2, the summer between your junior and senior year of high school. This will give you enough time to fill out your application, and you can start requesting transcripts from your counselors during the summer if your school is open, or maybe even during the first semester of your senior year. It will also allow you to apply to some early action deadlines, which will enable you to get your admissions decisions earlier. It will also be nice because in the summer you can focus on your application. So during your senior year, you can focus more time on your classes and courseworks. Of course, with all this being said, you can of course also apply after you graduate from high school. A lot of students do choose to take a gap year, either to do an internship or to explore their passions, and that is also completely okay to take that gap year as well. So let's get into the application. There are lots of different types of applications. There are online applications, there are school-specific applications. There's still some paper applications out there, and the common application is pretty popular right now at Temple University, where I'm a counselor at. We are Common App exclusive, and we will delve into the Common App a little bit later in the next slide. But in general, as you are about to fill out your application, these are some general information that you should have prepared going into your application. You're going to want to have your biographical information, such as your name and your address. When you're filling out your email address or your mailing address, make sure it's a place where you can receive important documents. So it's a place that you're going to check frequently. So it's not going to be an email address that you don't ever check or anything like that. It's going to, because a lot of times that is how universities communicate with you, is through that email address you use in your application. Additionally, if you're going to require a visa to come to the US, a lot of times that's also where you're going to receive important I-20 information as well too. And it's also a good idea to check what the handle is of your email address too, because we will be seeing the name of the handle of your email as well. So just make sure that it's suitable for applying to colleges and universities. They're also going to ask some information about demographics, family information, education. For education, we ask that you try to be as accurate as you can be filling out, your grades and things like that. But do know we will be receiving your official transcript. So don't stress too much about trying to figure out, about converting or any of those things, the grades, because we will be primarily basing our review off of your official transcript and document. And then also there might be a section where you can list your extracurricular activities. I highly, highly recommend taking the time to fill this section out, particularly schools that do holistic reviews, such as Temple University. We really do look at the school activities and things that you do. So it's not necessarily the quantity, but rather the quality. So it's not like you have to do 100 different things, but maybe you do 2 or 3 things consistently throughout your entire high school, and you dedicate a lot of time and energy to whatever it is that activity is. Particularly, be sure to mention leadership skills. If you're the captain of your basketball team, or maybe you're the treasurer in your student council, we really like to see those things. And again, especially schools that do holistic reviews, where they take into account the entire part of your application, not just your transcript or test scores. That's a really important part to be sure to remember to fill out. Additionally, they may require you to submit an application fee. So typically that'll range anywhere from $50 to $90 per application. If you feel that you qualify for a fee waiver, do reach out to the college or university, because many universities and colleges offer fee waivers. In the common application, you can select that fee waiver directly within the profile section. So these are just some things to think about to have as you prepare to fill out that application. So I mentioned earlier about the Common App. So it is an online application that will allow you to apply to multiple universities. So for example, all the kind of, like information about your address, your name, all of those things, you only have to fill out once. And then you can use that information to apply to multiple schools. There are not just schools in the US, but worldwide. There are some schools in Canada and Europe that are also on the Common App as well. So it really makes it quite easy for you to keep track of all of your applications. I'm going to play a very short video now explaining a little bit more about what the Common App is.
For many students, applying to college is the first step in a journey towards a better future. Common App is an online application that makes applying to college easy. Through a single platform, students can manage applications to multiple schools, request letters of recommendation, and connect to additional resources, including financial aid and scholarships once they've submitted. Here's how it works. After creating your account, adding a college is a great place to start. Common App members include more than 900 colleges and universities around the world. So there's a good chance you'll find a college that's right for you. You can search for a specific college or use specific criteria to explore colleges based on your needs and interests. Once you've added colleges to your list, the dashboard can help you stay organized. Here you can sort your college list by application deadline and view requirements details for each school. You can also see the status of different parts of your applications and each college's writing requirements. The application itself is made up of two parts: a set of common questions that go to any school you choose to apply to, and questions that are specific to individual colleges on your list. The common portion of the application, or Common App, helps you tell your unique story to every college you're applying to. Here's where you'll share information about you and your family, your high school and academic history, and any activities you're involved in. This is also where you'll share your personal essay. Under the My Colleges tab, you'll find specific questions and requirements for each college on your list. Every college is different, so it's important you pay close attention to what they may require in addition to the common portion of your application. Some colleges may ask for additional essays, while others may have specific requirements for submitting test scores or letters of recommendation. Be sure to check each college's information, as their policies may change from year to year. Once you've completed all the required questions in both sections, you're ready to submit your application. It's that simple. Congratulations! You've taken the first step towards your future by thinking about applying to college. Don't forget, Common App is here to support you along the way. You can find help at any time by visiting commonapp.org/help.
Great. So I hope that helped shed a little bit more information onto what the Common Application is. And I really do think it's a great tool for you to use to be able to apply to multiple universities. At Temple University, our main campus is located in Philadelphia, but we also have campuses in Rome and in Tokyo. So you can do an entry year program where you start your year in Rome and complete your year in Philadelphia, or you could start your year in Tokyo and then finish it in Philadelphia. So if you are interested in applying to either of those entry year programs, you can also select those campuses in the Common App as well. So now that we've kind of talked about the application portion, I thought we would move on to talking about the transcripts. And again, starting with a little question. So which classes do you think that colleges do not consider when looking at your high school grades? Is it 1, mathematics, or 2, physical education? All right, I don't see any responses yet, but the answer is we do not look at physical education classes. We consider math classes. I see there's a question. It is some interest you're given.
So we have a question from a student who's wondering about letters of recommendation. Does Temple University require letters of recommendation? And
Yeah.
some of the GPA requirements, of course.
Yeah, so I can talk about letters of recommendation soon. That will be coming up in the presentation. And as far as the GPA requirement, so at Temple, we don't have a specific GPA that we are looking for when the applications come in. We don't have a specific requirement to apply, but we do a very holistic review of the application, and I can touch more on that when I get to talking about the transcripts more in depth. Okay, so for the people that said that we look at mathematics and not at PE, that is correct. Thought we'd talk a little bit more here about the transcripts, about why it's arguably one of the most important aspects. If we could play the video, please.
When it comes to college admissions, there are basically two different ways that colleges will evaluate applicants. They'll either use a numeric review process, which looks exclusively at the numbers, your grades, your courses, your testing, or they'll use a holistic review process, which takes into account the whole student. And so in addition to grades and courses and testing, we're also going to look at essays, letters of recommendation, extracurricular activities, things of that nature. Now, in both cases, the most important piece of the application is going to be the student transcript. The transcript tells me a student's academic performance through their grades. It gives me a sense of the rigor of their coursework, whether they're taking honors or AP classes. And that's the best predictor for student success at the college level, right? How they've done academically within their high school classes. And I think students should feel good about this because it means that your 4 years of hard work within school are going to be the thing that colleges care about the most. And it's really an incentive for students from 9th grade on forward to prioritize their academics and to take their education really seriously. So focus mostly on the grades and the transcript. That's really the centerpiece of the college application.
So as this admissions counselor states, your transcript is one of the most important aspects of your application. So we're going to delve a little deeper into what a counselor is looking at when they're looking at your transcript. And I can also talk a little bit about the questions that you asked regarding to GPAs. Because that's actually what we're talking about next. So a GPA, it stands for grade point average. We understand that, many schools' grading systems may look different in different countries and may not match the 4.0 grading scale used in US schools. And that's completely okay. Counselors are trained in many different international credentials and will read your transcript within the context of your school curriculum. To help a counselor, it is important that where possible to provide what's called a school profile. This will give the counselor a better idea of how to understand the curriculum and grades at your school. So here's an example, part of an example of the grading scale that may be found within a school profile. This one is using the US grading scale. So as you can see, an A in the US is around a 4.0 or between a 93 and 96. So your school may have a different grading scale, and having that, if you're having that sent from your school, would be very helpful if possible. Like I said, if not, we are trained in many different international credentials and will be able to review your application without one. If your transcript is not in the English language, it's also really important when applying to US schools to make sure that there is a translation of your transcript as well. So at Temple, we like to see the original transcript in the original language, as well as a certified translated copy in English. So at Temple, we do not have a specific requirement for translating the document, as only it has to be from a certified translator. Some universities may require that you use a credential evaluation company, so they might require that you submit your transcript through someone like Wes. At Temple, that is not the case, but it is important to reach out to each school and college and see what their requirements are. Okay, so now that we kind of have a better understanding of grading systems and school profiles, we can look a little bit closer at what counselors actually look for when they're looking at your transcript. So when we're looking at your transcript, we're generally asking questions such as, what classes are they taking? How challenging are these classes? How challenging are they within the courses offered at their high school? Are they taking the most demanding classes? How high are the standards for the class? Is there an upward trend of grades? Or, for example, did you start out making maybe C's your first year and then you progress to B's and A's? Or are you getting A's the entire time? If you're getting A's the entire time, were you challenging yourself in your curriculum? So these are kind of all questions that we are asking. If there's a dip in your grades, why is that? A lot of times there might be various reasons for that. And you're more than welcome to be able to explain those dips in your grades within your application, or as we'll talk about later, in your letters of recommendations. But these are all sort of general questions that we're asking as we're looking at your transcript. Classes that we consider when we're reviewing are generally going to be your, standard language classes, your science classes, your foreign language classes, math, social sciences. We generally don't look at, your physical education classes or religious classes. So these are sort of the ways in which we're reviewing your transcripts. When you're submitting your transcripts, it's also important to reach out to the college or university you're applying to see how they would like for you to submit those documents, and maybe if there's any additional documents that they're going to need. I mentioned earlier about credential evaluations and translated copies. Some schools may require different curriculums to submit different types of documentation. So at Temple, we require your high school transcript. And for some curriculums, that might include a year of your middle school. So we need usually your last 3 years of education, whatever that means in your curriculum. And then depending on the country that you are applying from, if you have any test scores that you need to submit as well, we would need those too. So, for example, if you were, let's say, in A-level curriculum, we would need to see your IGCSEs. If you have AS-level exams and your A-level exams, we would need to see those. Or if you are in an IB curriculum, we would need to see your IB test scores. Now, we understand that if you're applying while you're in school, you may not have all of those test scores yet. But if you are admitted and you choose to enroll, we will ask for those final transcripts as proof of graduation. So those are just kind of things to think about. Some schools may require that you take certain classes in order to get into certain majors. So it's a really good idea to reach out and ask what the requirements are at the university you're applying to. At Temple, we don't have any specific classes that you need to take in order to get into any majors. And as I mentioned earlier, to apply, you do not have to have a certain GPA to be eligible to apply to Temple. The only exception would be our nursing major does require the equivalent of a 3.25 GPA to be eligible to apply. But other than that specific major, you can have any major to be eligible to apply. And we do a very holistic review looking at anything that's in your application. We look at your transcripts, your extracurricular activities, your test scores if you choose to submit them, which I will get to next, and your letters of recommendations. Now that we have we're going to test your knowledge of standardized test scores. Which of the below do you think are English language proficiency test scores? We have A, TOEFL, B, Duolingo, C, IELTS, or D, all of the above. Don't see any answers coming in yet, but the answer is D, all of the above. So as you can see, here are some of the English language test scores that were mentioned on the slide before. We have IELTS, TOEFL, PTE, Duolingo. So many universities may require international students to submit an English language test score. If English is your native language, or if you have been in a curriculum where English is the medium of instruction, there may be exemptions for you at certain institutions. So at Temple, you can be exempted from the English language test, submitting an English language test score if you have been in a school for 3 or plus years by the time you apply, where English is the medium of instruction, or if English is your native language. But otherwise, you will be required to submit an English language test score. At Temple, we have something called the Conditional Admissions Program. So if you are academically eligible to be entered into the university, to be admitted to the university, but your English language abilities do not quite meet our direct entry requirements, you can be admitted into our conditional admissions program, which is where you will have to complete levels 1, 2, or 3, and you will be placed into one of those levels depending on your English language test score. And once you complete level 3, you will be directly enrolled into the university. Our conditional admissions program is really great because they'll help you with your English language skills, and you can still gain college credit while you are in the conditional admissions program. You'll just have that extra support and guidance of our amazing Temple Center for American Language and Culture staff there to help you with all of those classes that you'll be taking. In addition to English language test scores, some universities may require you to submit what's called ACT and SAT test scores. The ACT is the American College Testing, and SAT is the Scholastic Aptitude Test. So these are multiple choice tests administered by the College Board, and they help, they measure college readiness in students. At Temple, we are test optional, so students can choose whether or not they need to submit an SAT or ACT test score. Whether or not you choose to submit an ACT or SAT test score, you'll still be considered for our merit-based scholarships. So my recommendation is if you have taken one, you have done well on it, it reflects you as a student, go ahead and submit it. But if you didn't have access to a testing center, or maybe you took it and you did poorly on it, then you do not have to submit that test score. That is completely okay. It's really just a way for students who have taken it, have done well on it, or they feel that it reflects them to recognize that achievement. I see a thing in the chat. Is Duolingo be considered worse than IELTS or an equal substitute? So one is not considered to be worse than the other. If a university will accept IELTS, TOEFL, or Duolingo, then you are more than welcome to submit any one of those. Actually, at Temple, we accept Duolingo, IELTS, and TOEFL. And I recommend Duolingo, actually, because it can be on demand, and oftentimes it's cheaper as well. And some schools may have fee waivers as well, so it's always good to reach out to see if there are any fee waivers available too for these tests. Duolingo specifically. So, but good question. Thank you for asking.
Thank you so much, Katie, for such an informative answer. And thank you, Lisa, for reaching out.
If the university doesn't require SAT or ACT test scores, then they're more likely going to put more weight on your transcripts as well. So that's also something to think about as you are applying to universities. So here's Jeff Brenzel. He's the former Dean of Undergraduate Admissions at Yale University, and he's going to answer the question, what is the most important part of the application?
When we're on the road, we often play a little kind of quiz show game with students, asking what they think is the most important part of the application. Many students respond, well, the testing must be the most important. It's actually one of the less important elements in the file. The testing can give you a sense of what schools are sort of within your range. And it gives the school a sense of what students in the applicant pool are within their range. The most important part of your application, bar none, no question, any college, is your high school transcript. Probably the next most important are your teacher recommendations, particularly if you're applying to any kind of selective college or university.
So yes, as mentioned, the transcript is the very important part of your application, if not the most. But it might have been surprising for some of you to hear that the letters of recommendation are also a very important part of the application, which brings us to our next slide. Who do you think should write your letter of recommendation? Is it A, a current or recent teacher, or B, a parent or guardian? If you answered A, you would be correct. Typically, for letters of recommendation, counselors would like to see at least one letter of recommendation be an academic recommendation from someone who can speak to your strengths of a student. In most cases, this will be a teacher or counselor recommendation. However, if it is someone other than a teacher or counselor, that should also be okay. You can also usually submit other letters of recommendation, but usually counselors would like to see at least one from a current or recent teacher. Now, at Temple, it is optional to submit a letter of recommendation. It is not required to be able to, submit your application. But it does really help us better understand you as a student because like I said, we do a holistic review of the application. So when we see those letters, it really helps us gauge better about you as a student. As I mentioned earlier, if you've done poorly in a class, maybe they can explain why. Maybe they're like, oh, they've gotten lower grades, but they were consistently showing up, after class. They made sure that they were asking all the right questions, or they improved in these ways. So these can really give us really great insight that we can't get from just reading your transcript. So here are some tips for requesting a letter of recommendation. The first one is definitely to ask early. You want to give your teacher time to be able to both write your letter of recommendation, as well write a good letter of recommendation. You're going to also want to ask the right person. You're going to want to reach out to someone who knows you really well, will feel comfortable writing a letter for you, and be able to speak to your strengths as a student. So typically this will be a teacher maybe from a current class, or maybe it's a teacher you've had for multiple classes, although it does not have to be. Maybe the teacher that knows you best is the teacher that you didn't do as well in your class. Or maybe it's the teacher that's from your favorite subject. But when you request that the teacher write you a letter of recommendation, it's really good to provide them with maybe detailed information about yourself. Maybe you could attach a resume to your email when you're asking them to write it, or submit them the resume in person, just so that they can use that information as they're writing your letter of recommendation. So that resume will remind them of all the accomplishments that you've achieved, maybe remind them of specific works that you're proud of, and maybe mention any challenges that you've overcame. You can also talk to them about your hobbies and your plans for college in the future. So this is a really great chance for them, a really great thing for them to have as they're writing that letter of recommendation. You may also want to waive your right to view the recommendation letter. So waiving your rights lets the colleges know that you've never tried to read the letter of recommendation, which might reassure some colleges that your recommenders have provided support that is truthful. It's completely up to you. It's not required. It's just sometimes some people choose to waive it just so that they know that what the counselor has written is, a true statement. And then after your counselor has submitted your letter of recommendation, it's always good to follow up with a thank you, and keep them updated about the status of your application as well. And so now that we've kind of learned about each part of the application, it's time to apply. It's a really good idea to have 2 match schools to apply to, 2 reach schools to apply to, and 2 safety schools to apply to. So what that means is match schools are a school where you sort of match all of the requirements. So maybe your GPA matches their average GPA. A reach school might be some school that is maybe more difficult to get in. Maybe they have really specific qualifications, like specific SAT scores you need, or specific GPAs you need, and maybe your GPA and your test scores don't quite meet those. And then a safety school is a school where you exceed those requirements. So you are pretty certain that you will get an acceptance to that institution. So that way, when you apply, you'll at least be getting 2 acceptance letters if you apply to 2 match schools, 2 reach schools, and 2 safety schools. And that will allow you a lot of options when you're applying to schools, and kind of options to choose from as well. So I hope that this has helped provide you with some more information. And my last kind of tip is just to make sure that you are contacting the admissions office if you have any questions. It is completely okay if you are unclear about anything, because maybe the directions are not easily accessible online, or you'd like to learn about updates or status of your applications. It's really, really great to reach out. Just know that communication is often tracked, so please do not be rude. You don't want to be overly persistent. If you just submitted an application yesterday and then start, demanding where your response is the next day, that would be considered overly persistent. But certainly it's okay to check up on the status of your application if it's been, a long time. You're supposed to receive that early action deadline on the 10th of January, and it is now, the 20th of January, and you have not heard anything. That is completely okay to follow up and ask maybe if there's anything missing from your application or anything like that. And the last thing is try to reach out yourself to admissions counselors. Maybe don't have family members reach out on your behalf where possible, just because oftentimes counselors are not even allowed to speak to your family members about your application due to privacy rights and things like that. Additionally, it shows initiative from your end as well, that we know that, that you're excited and interested in applying. But yes, I hope that was helpful to kind of give you an overview about the application process and how to apply to U.S. institutions. If you have any questions about how to apply or studying in the U.S. or Temple University specifically, I am more than happy to answer those questions.
Thank you so much, Catherine, for a wonderful presentation. I highly enjoyed it, and I think I speak for all the students that you really put the admission requirements in a very straightforward and easy to understand format. So I already see a question from Lisa. Lisa, thank you so much for being so active today. And Lisa is wondering if the teacher has written a letter of recommendation in English, can it be sent, or does it have to go to a special office to be approved?
That's a really great question. So if you have a letter of recommendation that is written in a non-English language, at Temple University, you can submit that with a translated copy. So the translation, preferably for a recommendation, should be a certified translator, but for translated letters of recommendation, we are far less stringent. So if somebody else, another family member, can translate that into English as well, that is also okay.
Thank you so much for your answer, and thank you for great presentations. Do we have any more questions? Okay, very good. So while we wait for questions, I would just like to take some time to present our second presenter today, our lovely guest speaker, Rhiannon Suarez, Assistant Director of Admissions at Dartmouth College, who has two wonderful students joining us today, Andrea and Naniko, who are going to share an inside look into Ivy League colleges' acceptance processes, and of course, share more information on how you can really highlight your accomplishments in your application and take the chance to stand out and make sure that your application is truly unforgettable. Rhiannon, it's so wonderful to have you here with us. Thank you so much for joining. Please take it away. The floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here with you all. My name is Rhiannon or Suarez. I'm an assistant director of admissions at Dartmouth, and I am joined by two awesome students who I would love for them to introduce themselves. I know they have class a little bit after 12, so they'll be with us for about 20 minutes, and then I will take it away with the rest of the presentation. But if you all have any specific questions for the students, please put them in the chat so that they can answer them before 12. So Rhea, would you like to introduce yourself first?
Yeah, sure. Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Rhea or Andrea. I'm a senior at Dartmouth. I study computer science and government, and I'm also a transfer student. I'm also an international student from the Philippines, and I guess just a little bit of what I do on campus. I work as a tour guide for the admissions office. I am president of the International Students Club on campus. I also work for the engineering makerspace, which is a lot of fun, as well as do like Frisbee. I'm involved, and I'm also involved in Greek life.
Hello, everybody. My name is Nani Kokakonashvili. I am from Georgia, Tbilisi, sending a lot of love to you. I am a 27, a freshman at Dartmouth College, and I am on the track trying to decide my major in terms of math, computer science, economics. A little bit of what I do on campus as well. I am a international student ambassador. Firstly, I am also a part of Dartmouth for Capellas, which is an a cappella group. I am a part of Fossil for Dartmouth and clubs such as Swiss, Smart Women Securities, and Women in Business. Yeah, looking forward to talking to you more.
Fantastic. Thank you all so much. And I think, Victoria, if you can pull up the presentation, that would be fantastic. So we'll go ahead and get started. A little bit about Dartmouth, and we'll talk about Ivy League, kind of the Ivy League institution that is Dartmouth. I think a lot of people group Ivy League schools together. But really what makes the Ivy League is A, these institutions are the oldest in the United States. So Dartmouth was founded before the US was even really founded. And B, they do have a very rigorous program and tend to be they are all Reach schools, as Katie did a great job of explaining Reach schools. So all Ivy League schools are Reach schools. I will say, though, what makes Dartmouth different, we can go to the next slide. So what makes Dartmouth different is that Dartmouth is rural, and it is the most rural of all the Ivy League schools, and it is also the smallest of all the Ivy League schools. So if you're wondering where Dartmouth is actually located, it's in the northeastern corner of the U.S., and it is located in a town, not a city, called Hanover, New Hampshire, and it is about 2 hours north of Boston, 3 hours south of Montreal, and about 5 hours north of New York City. So I would love to hear from Naniko, if you want to share a little bit about, since you're still in your first year and you're still kind of adjusting to a lot, what was your transition like to Dartmouth? What has it been like for you? Expected things and unexpected things.
Of course. Coming from a city, I was very much used to the city setting, even though I have lived in a village for a lot of time. And expectations for Dartmouth and the rural area was very much set. I thought that I would be very much around nature mostly. And yeah, that is pretty much what happens in Dartmouth, because we're very close to many forest and a lot of DOC trips, Dartmouth outing clubs that I've taken to explore the area and the forest that we have surrounded. So yeah, the transitioning period was definitely apparent for me, because accessing the city and going down to Boston or anything that I needed was a hassle. However, it was a lot of fun and a bonding experience with my friends. And yeah, Dartmouth is a very special space. It makes you feel more bonded with people, because all that is to do is with the people here and the nature. So yeah, it was very special.
Amazing. Thank you. And we can go to the next slide too, so you can see kind of a different perspective of Dartmouth. You can walk from one end of the Dartmouth campus to the other in about 15 minutes. So again, it is a really small institution. There's about 4,000 undergraduate students and 2,000 graduate students. And just as comparison, I went to a university in the US that was a large public school, and my school had 40,000 undergraduate students, so 10 times the size of Dartmouth. We can go on to the next slide as well. Just to show you all that Dartmouth is a 4-season campus. So I think something a lot of students don't think about when they're applying to college is weather, but it is a huge part of your decision if you like the cold or not. And on the next slide, you can also see what our general campus looks like. It's very much a winter wonderland. So Dartmouth has a lot of traditions revolving around the different seasons. And Rhea, I'm wondering if you can share like one of your favorite traditions at Dartmouth, or something that you really enjoy related to, let's say, winter, since we're in winter already.
Okay, yeah. This is very fitting. I am not a huge winter girl, coming from the Philippines, so was kind of scared of that. Sometimes I wear like 5 layers on, especially frigid days. But I think my favorite winter tradition would probably be the annual snowball fight, which happens on the first, first snowfall of winter term. And I think this term it happened like first, second week. And so what like happens is, a couple in the afternoon or late or like early evening, you usually get an email from Dr. Seuss, who is a Dartmouth alum, telling you to go down to the green, which is the center of campus, and just like unleash and like wreak havoc, to, participate in the snowball fight. And yeah, it's been like so much fun, the past couple of years, just like doing all of that. And also just like, pelting your friends with snowballs and like making snow angels afterwards. And yeah, really, really fun. And I think just like, seeing like hundreds of like students just like on campus, kind of like participating in that more like, childlike energy. It's like really cool.
Thank you so much, Andrea, for sharing such a wonderful piece of your experience. We already have a question from a student. So Margaret is wondering, Andrea, as a transfer student, was it difficult to enter Dartmouth, and did you receive a full tuition scholarship?
Ooh, so I guess, was it difficult to enter Dartmouth? I'm not particularly sure if this is asking if it was difficult to be admitted or if it's difficult to transition. If it was difficult to be admitted, I'm not really sure. Ree would probably know better as part of the admission officers who admitted me. In terms of like the transition, I think yeah, it was a bit hard at first, I would say, but I think I kind of like went into it definitely acknowledging that I wanted to make the most of the remaining 3 years that I had at Dartmouth and really pushed myself to just meet new people, join new things, and try to make as much of like, the time that I had. And I think through that, I was definitely able to assimilate myself into the community at Dartmouth, and that's something that I see across a lot of the different transfers here. In terms of like receiving full tuition, I do receive like financial aid, based on like my need, which is, kind of like different. It's not really like full tuition or like scholarships that like some other schools may like offer.
Thank you so much, Andrea, for sharing your experience.
Fantastic. Yes, thank you. And we will talk a little bit more about financial aid in a little. And I do see a Greek life question, and we will chat about that soon too. So that is coming up. Thank you all for your questions. And thanks, Victoria, for sharing. Okay, fantastic. We can go on to the next slide. And so whenever you're thinking about where you'd like to go or where you're thinking of applying in the US, there's so many different factors that you should consider, right? The weather, the location, how close it may be to an airport, how much that matters to you. The student body is a huge one. What is the international student presence like at an institution? What are the different cultural communities like? So this is a brief overview of what it's like at Dartmouth. So you'll see most class sizes at Dartmouth are really small. You have about 15 students in a given class. There's a lot of professors per student. And there's about like 7 students per faculty member at Dartmouth. So a lot of individualized attention. And about 92 countries are where our students are from. That changes every year. These numbers are a little outdated, so they have increased. More recently, I think this past year, the number of foreign citizens on campus is about 15%. And the number of first generation to college students, meaning that your immediate guardians or family members or parents did not receive a bachelor's degree, that has also steadily increased as well. So you always want to think about the demographics of the place that you're thinking of applying and how much you may feel like you would fit in there. We can go to the next slide then. And the next slide. Thank you. A little bit another thing that students may not think about when they're thinking about, what university they'd like to attend is the academic calendar. So most universities in the US, they do operate on a similar academic calendar. 2 semesters create a year. But at Dartmouth, it's a little bit different. And Naniko, I'm wondering if you can take a stab at explaining what the Dartmouth plan is like. And then we can talk a little bit more about, and Rhea, if you'd like to chime in at the end about challenges that the Dartmouth plan may present for international students as well as benefits. But what is the Dartmouth plan, Naniko?
So Dartmouth plan, the famous quarter system, the D plan that we all love, is a plan that allows us to have basically 4 terms in a year. We have a fall term, we have a winter term, we have a spring term, and a summer term. Generally, with like a general D plan, summer terms are off, so that's when we have holidays and we relax. But for the rest of the 3 terms, we take 3 courses, or 4 or 2. Generally, it's 3. One of the biggest benefits of the D plan is the fact that it's very flexible. And if you want to take a term off to work in an internship or go visit a family, or you have an emergency, you can always do so. And Rhea will talk more about what challenges this can have for international students, because there are some.
Yeah, I guess in terms of challenges, this is actually something that I faced in sophomore year when I was like planning for like my internships. Something that I didn't realize until I came here was that to do like an internship, you would have to use like OPT or CPT, which are like optional like practical training, and that depends on your visa status. And so to be able to do an internship using like legally, you would have to have been on campus taking classes for the past for the 3 terms before that. And so that usually means that, as an international student, if you want to do the summer doing your internship, that means you have to be on campus taking classes for fall, winter, and spring. And so that means that, if you want to do that, you would have to make sure to like plan your D plan around it. And so I think that kind of like is a bit of like added complexity. But of course, we have like OVIS, which is our office of like visa and immigration services on campus to like help with like any questions that you might have and to help you like make those plans. But I think also the D plan, like even as an international student, it's just really cool. I feel like especially with our different like study abroad programs, like I personally studied abroad in Vietnam over like fall break, for example. I feel like it does like provide like a lot of like opportunity to like students who technically are studying abroad in the US, but could study abroad like by extension like twice in another place. And I feel like that's like something that Dartmouth really invests in and is a great opportunity to do.
Awesome. Thanks, you too. And I know we may still have a lot of questions about the Dartmouth plan. At any university that you're thinking of attending, make sure you look at their academic calendar, and we'll talk more at the end about ways to contact current students to continue to ask them questions about it, because there's a different Dartmouth plan for every student, including for every international student. So we can go to the next slide. And something else that you may want to think about when you're thinking about universities is the potential difference and overlap between a research institution and a liberal arts college. So Dartmouth is a liberal arts college. And so really what that means is that it means a lot of different things, but when you apply to Dartmouth, you're not applying to a specific major. You are applying to the college as a whole. So when you arrive to Dartmouth, you can decide, okay, I wrote down that I wanted to do economics in my common application, but actually maybe I want to do theater, or maybe I want to do something else when you get here. And you don't have to declare your major until your 2nd year. So there's a lot of flexibility in terms of the classes that you take. You have to take a certain set of classes that forces you to be exposed to different subjects so that you can then decide what you'd like to pursue. The idea of the liberal arts is that you're not training for a specific career. You're training or you're learning about different disciplines that you can infuse into many careers in your life. Dartmouth sits at an interesting intersection between a research institution where there's a lot of high-level research happening and also the liberal arts. So I'm curious, Naniko, do you want to share a little bit about like a class that maybe you didn't expect to like or that you wouldn't have taken if it weren't for the liberal arts curriculum and what that experience was like for you?
Of course. So I am in my second term at Dartmouth. So I've currently have taken and am taking 6 classes in total. And the classes that I had to take through the requirement was the writing classes. So I took writing 5 and now I'm taking a seminar. And choosing and actually taking the class has been a very interesting experience for me, because not only did we learn about writing, but it was a very interesting process of choosing in between multiple very niche topics that I was interested in. For example, my seminar now is in we're exploring science and pseudoscience, and we're talking about UFOs and aliens, and it's a lot of fun. And through all of this fun information and experiences with my professor, we are learning to write and discuss more and have our skills in writing, which will be useful in any discipline that we will decide to go in. So yeah, my science and pseudoscience class has been one of the most extravagant and interesting classes that I've taken so far.
I love that. Thank you so much. We can go on to the next slide. Perfect. And I know, Rhea, you talked a little bit about being able to study away. So just so y'all know, I know that if y'all were to come to the US, you would already be studying away, right? You would be leaving whatever country you're in, if you're in the Ukraine right now or somewhere else, and you'd be coming to the US. But study away options are also available for international students, and financial aid does travel with you when you study away. It's very common. About 60% of Dartmouth students will study away somewhere at least once, and about 60% are engaged in research of some kind. We can go on to the next slide. Fantastic. And just so y'all know, these are some resources. You can take a picture of this if you'd like so that you can continue exploring Dartmouth, specifically through the lens of research and internships. So if you were to ever receive, for example, an internship that's unpaid, let's say through the United Nations. I had a friend in college that interned with the United Nations, and that internship was unpaid. So some institutions like Dartmouth can provide funding to help you actually get paid while you're doing that internship. And all of the different centers listed there are examples of centers that can provide such funding to you. And you can also do research with those centers on campus, or they can connect you to other parts of campus or other professors or faculty members at schools to help you with that. We can go on to the next slide. All right, we'll talk a little bit about campus community, and I know it's about 3 minutes until my students probably have to head out. So when it hits 12 and y'all have to head out, you are welcome to. But Rhea, before you head out, just to address the question in the chat, someone asked what Greek life is like at Dartmouth, and I think it can be difficult to explain Greek life in general to international students. So what's that like? How would you explain that?
Okay. Also, I think I'd probably be able to stay until like 12:15, hopefully. But in terms of like how Greek life is at Dartmouth. So Greek life is essentially, at least here, very just like social spaces. We have like fraternities, which are like, male, like Greek houses, sororities, which are like female, and also gender inclusive houses, for those who, like of all genders or of different gender identities. And in my experience, it's been like I rushed or joined a Greek house my sophomore fall, which was actually the first term that I was at Dartmouth. And it was definitely a way for me to kind of just like try to get to know more people. And I was kind of intimidated at first because I also didn't really know what Greek life at Dartmouth was all about. But even just like through the recruitment process, it was pretty much just me going to like a sorority, like to like the house where where some of the sisters lived, and like talking to like 3 or 4 of them for like a couple of minutes. And it was just like, getting to know them, us like asking each other questions, having like a good conversation, and was like really nothing scary at all. And so I've been part of Greek life for around 2 years now. And yeah, I think it's just has been like a good experience and been a great way for me to meet a lot of like women on campus. And something that I didn't realize until after I joined is that a lot of them are people who I honestly wouldn't have met through any other like groups that I'm involved in on campus. Like I like, you know, through like my sorority, I've met people who are like anthropology majors or environmental science majors who do like a cappella or do like stand-up comedy. And like I am not involved in any of those spaces and I wouldn't have known them otherwise. But like I think it's just really cool that, you know, through this I'm like exposed more to like the diversity of like, you know, who actually is at Dartmouth. And I think that has made my experience like a lot richer. And I think in general as well, like Greek life at Dartmouth, because so many students are involved in it, it has kind of like adapted and like shifted, you know, over time to be more inclusive of like the diversity on campus, whether that be through like race or socioeconomic class or like sexuality or gender. And I feel like because of that, you know, if you want to be involved in Greek life, you know, you definitely can. But also if you don't want to, that's also completely fine. Like my closest friends on campus are actually like none of them are actually affiliated. And you know, they're amazing. I love them and we have a good time. So yeah.
Amazing. Thanks, Rhea. And thanks so much, Naniko, in case you have to head out. I know you told me so. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Of course. So we'll keep going here. And yeah, we will ask Rhea at the end the question why she chose Dartmouth. That's a great question. So we can skip to the next slide. Dartmouth has over 160 different student organizations, and I listed a few that may be of particular interest to you all. So listed are a few different student support services. This is another thing you're going to want to think about when you're applying to U.S. colleges. You're going to want to think about what health services do they have? Mental health has just been such a huge topic of conversation for a few years now, but especially more recently in the US. So what counseling services does an institution offer? What access to counseling, you know, is available? Do they have a first generation office, like to support if you have never had someone in your family graduate from a college? So Dartmouth does offer a few of those different support services. The first one, the Office of Pluralism and Leadership, is kind of an umbrella diversity organization. They do so much on campus and they serve students of so many different identities. So they do have different identity-based support services that you can check out. Rhea mentioned she's the president of the International Students Association. So if you have any questions about that, you can also put it in the chat for her to answer. And we do also have specific Ukrainian student organizations on campus. So we do have the Dartmouth Student Alliance for Ukraine that is really, really active, among a few others. And as a fun fact, last fall, we actually celebrated the completion of our first Ukrainian language and culture class, which was really popular on campus. And I think a lot of students appreciated and enjoyed. So we can go to the next slide. Fantastic. Yeah. So Dartmouth, as an Ivy League institution, it is a Division I institution for sports. What does that mean? That's a fancy way to say that Division I institutions and all the Ivy League recruits varsity athletes. So there are a lot of athletic things going on around campus. There are dozens of athletic organizations that students are recruited for, but that you can also join just as someone interested. I know, Rhea, you said you're involved in Frisbee, right? Yeah, so you can do that as well. And we can go on to the next slide. Fantastic. So this is actually like when you're thinking about, oh, like a given, who are the students that get accepted to Dartmouth in 1 year? This is one class. This is one class right now. Currently, admissions officers like me are reading applications to admit about that size of a class, which is really exciting. So we'll talk a little bit about what the application process to Dartmouth is like and how that's similar to other institutions and how maybe it's not. So we can go to the next slide. Okay, so Katie mentioned this a little bit earlier, that Temple practices holistic admissions. Dartmouth does as well. Dartmouth also exclusively, like Temple, uses the common application. So that's the only way to apply to Dartmouth, makes it really kind of simple on your end. And Katie mentioned the importance of the transcripts and the school report. So Dartmouth does look at the transcripts. Dartmouth does look at the school report, which, as a reminder, is a document that your counselor or your Education USA advisor or the principal of your school, if you don't have a counselor, kind of a third-party person could do so, sharing information about your school and your curriculum so that we get a sense of what was offered to you over the past few years. So we look at all of that, but there is no minimum GPA to get into Dartmouth. There's no minimum testing score. We practice a holistic admissions process. What does that actually mean? When I read an application, I wish I had a set of papers to like show you an example. It's like as if I'm reading a book. So I read through everything. I read through the transcripts and the school report, and I don't stop reading. I read your essays. I read your letters of recommendation. And then our team makes a decision on your candidacy. But it's not just about numbers. Numbers are one part of the puzzle. We also get a sense of your values, your passions, your interests. And that's really what the idea of holistic admissions is. We're trying to take a look at you as a whole person and determine if you're a good fit on our campus. Individualized admissions also means that all of you tuning in right now, we do not compare your application to anyone else in this Zoom kind of space or virtual space, or the application to any other student in the world. Your application is individual to you. So we look at you in your context and we take a look at what you've been able to accomplish and do given your specific situation. So Dartmouth requires 3 letters of recommendation, 1 from a school counselor, which is pretty typical of many institutions, 2 from teachers. Some US universities will ask for one of the teachers to be a STEM teacher, one of them to be a humanities. Dartmouth does not have a preference, just 2 core subject teachers, which is anything from math, English, history, foreign language, anything like that. And we do also have, we're one of 2 institutions in the US to encourage what's called a peer letter of recommendation. So that's basically where you ask a good friend of yours, someone who's within 5 years of your age, to write your letter of recommendation. And they talk about what makes you such a great friend, right? Because when you're coming to a place like Dartmouth, a small community like this, you're not just a number, you're a person, and we want to know what kind of person you're going to be on campus outside of the classroom. We do require English proficiency tests, and similar to what Katie was mentioning, you can either take the Duolingo test, the IELTS test, the TOEFL. We don't have a preference for either one. SAT or ACT testing has recently been reinstated, so I know we may have some questions about this. So beginning for the class of 2029, so if you're thinking of applying as soon as next year, next fall or winter, you will be required to submit a standardized test of some kind. As international students, you can pick one of 5 options to fulfill this requirement. So you can either send your SAT or ACT score in, or you can send in, if you have the IB, if you're in the IB program, you can send in your IB predicted and final exam scores. If you're in an A-level Cambridge program, you can send in your A-level exam scores predicted and final, or you can take 3 AP exams, or you can take a national exam if wherever you're living, if there is access to a national exam. And if none of those options are available to you, please email our admissions office with your situation. I think especially with the war going on in Ukraine, if you're like, I just don't have access to a testing center, or I don't have access to kind of fulfill this requirement at all for any of the requirements that we're talking about, you should email the admissions office of whatever school you're thinking about applying to see if they can work something out with your specific situation. Don't just, throw your hat out of it. Because we do have 2 different decision rounds, early decision and regular decision. And we can go to the next slide to briefly talk about financial aid. So financial aid, a lot of numbers on this page. Main idea here, y'all, is that in the US, there are, for generalization purposes, 2 different types of financial aid, for the most part, that institutions will offer you. So there's merit-based financial aid and need-based financial aid. Rhea mentioned that she receives need-based financial aid, and that's because everyone at Dartmouth is only offered financial aid based on their need. So what does that mean? It's based on your family's income. So some schools will offer you financial aid based on your grades in high school, or your ability to play a sport, or an artistic talent, or something, a skill of yours. That's a merit-based scholarship. So some universities will offer that. Dartmouth does not. Dartmouth only offers financial aid based on your family's income and ability or inability to pay for college. So there are some students that are on a full scholarship at Dartmouth because their family is very low income and they cannot afford to attend Dartmouth otherwise. There are some students in the middle, and there are some students that pay the entire price of a Dartmouth education because their family can afford it. So that is the main idea with financial aid. As international students, you would apply for financial aid using the CSS profile. And there was a financial aid session that I had with the Ukrainian Global Scholars a few weeks ago, if any of you are in that cohort. And there were a lot of questions about, well, I may not have the necessary documentation needed for the CSS profile, like it's asking me for this, but I don't have access to it because of the war. That is completely understandable. Please email our financial aid office to explain that to them, and they can walk through different options for you to be able to apply for financial aid. So we can go on to the next slide. This is just contact information. So that little QR code, connect with a student there, is a way for you to get in contact with any student, including Naniko, who had to leave, or Rhea, who, yay, thank you for still being here. So their faces are on that profile. You can scroll down and see any other student that you'd like to chat with about their major or extracurricular interests or anything like that, or where they're from, and you can email them. If you have any financial aid questions, please email that specific financial aid email. And that is all I have. Maybe, Rhea, we can close out with that one question in the chat. Why did you choose Dartmouth?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of why I chose Dartmouth, I think my freshman year, pretty much, I mean, I was at Tufts, but it was also like the year that like COVID was pretty bad, and I just kind of like felt pretty like isolated, like from campus and from my classes and the community. Partly because I was like doing freshman year completely remotely from the Philippines, which is a 12-hour time difference. Would not recommend to anyone to be like nocturnal essentially for a year. But because of that, I was kind of like thinking that, oh, I want to like turn over like a new leaf and like start like fresh somewhere else. And I think like Dartmouth just like really stood out to me for like a lot of different reasons. I like the first reason was like mostly like academic. There's like a major called quantitative social sciences that I was like really interested in. Strangely enough, I am no longer majoring in that because I discovered that I actually don't really want to do data science that much, and now just do computer science and government separately. But liberal arts education right there. And I guess like things that I've like kind of like realized since coming to Dartmouth, which has like really made me appreciate it just like so much more. I think first of all, just like how unique the Dartmouth experience is, being in this like little like town of like Hanover, New Hampshire, a place where I really did not imagine myself living like ever. Coming from a city and like knowing that I'm going to a city after I graduate, I feel like this is like, pretty much the only time in my life where I'm going to be like living in a small town, having such like a serene, like, collegiate like vibe, being able to like just walk around campus and seeing like a billion of my friends, but also having like fun traditions like first year trips, where you can like go on like a like fun little trip with like 6 other like new students and like 2 upperclassmen, and I met my best friend on that trip, and I like today like am literally like rooming with her senior year, and so also like annual like snowball fight, like really like cute things like that I feel kind of like makes the Dartmouth experience. And I feel like not only like binds together like classes but also like generations of like Dartmouth like students and alum. I think it's just like super like cool and super awesome. I think the other piece of just like why I love Dartmouth, I guess like 2 more, I don't want to like ramble on forever, is like one of them would be how easy it is to be involved in like the things that you want to explore here. I think for me, I really wanted to go into college and like use it as a opportunity for exploration. And I think that Dartmouth is like a awesome and like great place for that. Like clubs here are like really easy to join. It's really easy to get involved in research. Really easy to get like different jobs or different like opportunities. Even if, you know, you're not like amazing at it, even if you have like zero experience in it, don't have the resources, you can like find that here at Dartmouth. And I think that that's really unique. And I think that that accessibility makes just like our experience as students better, because you're given that opportunity to explore more and actually figure out like what you really like. Like I am not an engineering student, but I did engineering research. I also work at the engineering makerspace, and it's like been some of like the funnest things I've ever done. And I think like that's just like an example of that. And I think lastly, very probably something that, you know, virtual sessions, if you've like been on them, it's just like, you know, oh, like the people make like the college, which is like, you know, kind of like cliche, but is very true. I think especially like, you know, here at Dartmouth, just like everyone I've met has been like incredibly like loving and sweet. And, you know, college can be like kind of tough sometimes. And so knowing that I have like this community to rely on has been so comforting. And I think especially, you know, at Dartmouth again, the people here have been some of the most, you know, accomplished and like smart and like amazing people ever. Could like literally, you know, have won like a bunch of like international Olympiad medals, but would never tell you because they don't really think it's that important about themselves. And so, yeah, you know, like they are like some of the coolest and like smartest people I've ever met, but also incredibly like down to earth and humble. And I think that that's just like an awesome combination to have. And has been my experience, at least for the past few years. So yes.
Thank you so much, Rihanna, for a fantastic and highly informative presentation. I really enjoyed it. And thank you so much to Andrea and Naniko for sharing your experiences and for giving us a peek at college life at Dartmouth College. I see one more question in the comments from Yeva. So Yeva is wondering, what are some of the requirements and how are they different for transfer students? If, for instance, Yeva is a transfer student, a sophomore in her country, but would like to try and apply as a third-year student.
Do you want to take that one first, Katie? Because I know that it may be different from school to school.
So about transferring, why?
Yes, so we have a question from Yeva, who's wondering, are the requirements any different for transfer students in particular?
Yeah, so at Temple, there are differences. So for our transfer applicants, we're really just looking at your university transcript. And so while we do a very holistic review for our first year applicants, for our transfer, your merit-based scholarship is based purely on the GPA of your transcript from your university. And it can be from a university inside or outside the US. We will do the conversion in-house. And then depending on the type of university that you've attended, so you know, there's lots of different variables. If it's like a vocational university or something like that, our transfer team is really awesome. So they'll be able to let you know how many credits will transfer. So they'll have those conversations with you at that point of application. So they probably won't do a whole lot before you apply, but once they've gotten the application and they've kind of looked at it, then they'll be able to let you know if those credits are going to transfer or not.
Thank you so much, Katie, for your question. And Rhiannon, from your point of view?
Yeah, so very, very kind of similar with a few differences. So at Dartmouth and at, you know, many schools, there's a separate kind of transfer application. So at Dartmouth, you can find that on the website. And in terms of financial aid, you are welcome to apply for financial aid through the CSS profile whenever. You can apply at any point during your undergraduate education, and you can apply as a transfer student as well. Being a transfer student does not impact the amount of aid that you would receive, since financial aid is completely based on your family's income and nothing else at Dartmouth and at other need-based institutions. However, Dartmouth only allows transfer applicants who have completed 2 years of college coursework or less. And if you are an international student, slight little like asterisk, if you're an international student and you happen to be a current student, I guess since all of us since this is Ukrainian focused. So if you are a Ukrainian student, you're from the Ukraine and you are currently at a Ukrainian university doing your first year of college studies and you say, oh, I think I want to transfer to a place like Dartmouth, you can apply to Dartmouth either as a first year or a transfer student. So if you're still in that first year of your home country university system, you can choose. After that point, though, you would be considered a transfer student and you cannot apply as a transfer student with more than 2 years of education. So a little complicated, but you can always email our admissions office to ask any specific questions about that.
Thank you so much to both of you for your wonderful presentations and for answering the questions of our lovely students. One last call for questions. We would love to hear from you. And I would just like to reiterate that communication, as Katie and Rihanna have said, is key. So please feel free to sign up for a free consultation with one of our lovely advisors at Education USA. And if you have specific questions, either about Temple University or Dartmouth College, I would be more than happy to direct you to an admissions counselor or, of course, a student ambassador so that you can get first-hand information and really understand in-depth the admission process for your dream college or university. Thank you so much to all of you for being with us. Thank you so much for being so active. We wish you the best of luck in your admission process and, of course, hope to see you in future sessions as a successful student in the US. I wish you a lovely evening. Stay safe and stay with Education USA. Bye, and thank you so much.